All right. Thank you all for your time, and I'm glad to see so many of you here. It is now time for us to start our second session of today. What? The XXX, 02X, and the 3X fields in RDA. Dr. Sonia Archer-Capuzzo is Assistant Clinical Professor of Library and Information Sciences at the University of North Carolina, Greensboro, where she teaches courses in information organization, cataloging and classification, indexing and abstracting, and music librarianship. She also regularly teaches cataloging webinars and workshops for the North Carolina State Library and the Southeast Music Library Association. She is currently finishing a term on the Music Library Association board as member at large. Sonia loves cataloging and enjoys coordinating with libraries of all sizes to design volunteer cataloging experiences so that she can keep practicing and learning while helping out where she can. So Sonia, we are ready for you to go ahead and get started. Go ahead and do your share screen whenever you're ready.
All right.
Thank you.
Let me pull up all the boxes here. I've got the chat in front of me, so I should be able to follow along with you guys. So hello, everybody. Yeah, so we're talking about O2X and 3XX fields today. Let me sort of get you started on how this is going to work. So I've got a decent amount of time here. Please ask questions and chime in as we go. There will probably be times when I'll say, I'm not completely sure about this. And if somebody else is, please feel free to weigh in. I wanted to start with a little introduction, and I'll do that in a minute. And then we're going to spend time on 3XX fields, primarily 3-4X, but I did get a couple of questions for other 300 fields before this presentation. And then I'll spend a little time talking about O2X fields. Whoops. There we go. So just a little introduction. First of all, the two very, very cute puppies on the screen here are my corgis, Teddy and Abby. They are on the screen just to show you that they are cute before they start barking and you think they aren't cute anymore. It could happen. So just a warning ahead of time. So I come from the perspective of having done cataloging for several years. I've done music cataloging, archival cataloging, special collections. I've done public libraries, school libraries, academic. Basically, if it's out there, I've tried to get my hands in it. So I've done a fair amount of practicing, but my job that I get paid for is teaching people. I am a professor, so I teach people to catalog. And so my perspective when I come in and do any one of these kinds of presentation / workshop, whatever's, is I tend to come from the perspective of if I can dumb it down enough that I'll understand it pretty quickly, then you're probably okay. For some of you, that might be a little too dumbed down, so hang with me. For others, it may still not get at what you need to know, and please ask questions. I'll also say I'm going to confess something here in this group. I like following rules, but I also kind of like breaking rules. So occasionally my answers to questions about should I do this or that is what do your patrons need? Do that. And don't worry too much about the rules. That comes from having spent a lot of time working with primarily public librarians. So also bear with me with that. And if I truly offend your sensibilities, I apologize. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and let the questions I got from people ahead of time steer the direction that today takes. And then again, you guys please chime in. So one of the first things that I got was somebody said, I would love to know why we use these fields and what purpose they serve when it comes to searching. I love when people ask why. Why are we doing something? And I love less when my answer has to be, well, it depends. But that's often what your answer ends up having to be. So with the O2X fields, these in most systems that I have experimented with, trying out all of your different library catalogs at one time or another, they're generally searchable. They're generally displayable in your catalog. Catalogers really value these. I remember spending a lot of time looking for things by the various codes in the O2X fields. It's a nice fast way to get somewhere. But they can also be useful for patrons because it can be a way to narrow down, say, to a particular recording or a specific book that they're looking for. With the different 3XX fields, these are a little more spotty from what I've seen, and I did some investigating in various catalogs just to make sure that I was up to date on this. But some catalogs make this sort of metadata searchable, some not so much. In some it displays, in others it doesn't. There are pluses and minuses to both of those. These are sometimes used for sorting and browsing, which is what I personally think is really the greatest potential with them, being able to narrow down your search results. These are very valued by catalogers, especially if it's already there, so you don't have to create your own. But they also have a lot of possible usefulness for patrons, especially through that sorting and browsing capability, where you could look for like a particular piece of music and you come up with scores and recordings and videos and who knows what else, books about it. And you could potentially use metadata from those 3.3 and 3.4x fields to narrow down to the exact format that you're actually looking for. And that's usually pretty possible, but these could make that work potentially even more smoothly. So right now, the usefulness of these and why they're there is still a little spotty, but in the future, if and when we move into the linked data sphere, this should become far more useful. All of these little bitty pieces of metadata that can be linked out there beautifully in a semantic web environment, this has huge potential. So in some ways, what you're seeing here, especially with the 3XX fields, is planning for that future. Most of us are not there, and it'll probably be a little while before most of us are there, but it's planning for that linked data future. Hopefully that makes you feel like this is at least somewhat worthwhile. And we will dive in first with the 3.4x fields. So I got a question, someone wrote, the 3XX are tied to so many different lists in so many different places. Even the RDA registry has multiple places to find lists. Will there ever be just one place that has all the lists? Wouldn't that be nice? So I have a link here to the RDA registry for anybody who hasn't looked at that before. It is freely available. It is lists of all these vocabularies. And I also have a list to OCLC's bibliographic formats website, the 3XX area, and you can actually get a link in every single field and subfield within there to the correct vocabulary. So if you're looking up rules, I can do that. And in fact, we can even just pop out and glance at these real quick. Plus whoops. They may have ended up with the same link there, but that's okay. We can fix that. Yeah, so this presentation should be available for you guys afterward, and if you want it faster than that, shoot me an email. I'm happy to share. Yeah, so there's these locations. So the registry, you can find all of these different controlled vocabularies. I think the shortcoming here is exactly the same reason it's great. It's gigantic and there's a lot to sort through. I find that the big format site is a little easier for me because I can be looking for a specific vocabulary and be thinking, I need to put something into, the 348 for notated music, and I can go to the actual subfield that I need, and it links me straight out to that registry, which is really handy. As to whether there's a place where all the terms live, I have not found anything, but that was one of those things that I thought I would open up to you guys if you know of anything. And also I would say that this slideshow, again, if you want it at the end, I'm going to actually have lists out to the vocabularies from the slideshow in a lot of the relevant places. So it could be a quick reference. Who knows? Maybe I'll get bored someday and actually have time. Don't hold your breath and make a list of my own, but I suspect that we'll all have retired by then. All right, doesn't look like anybody else knows anything about a central list, so there we are. Okay, I got a question about the 300 fields, and so I remember when I figured out that all of a sudden the 300 fields were now repeatable when we moved over to RDA. And it was earth-shattering, mind-blowing. It was amazing because in some cases it's really useful. So really for this question, the person's asking what's the best or typical way to enter accompanying material. So really you can do either. My rule of thumb was always that, and still is, that if I have two resources together that are potentially like significantly different, that I would definitely use 300 fields. This often happened where I would have like a score and parts, and the score is a whole lot bigger than the parts. So I would have a 300 for the score and a 300 for the parts. And that allowed me to specify those differences in sizes. For something like a score plus an audio disc, you could really go either way. And I'm just realizing I forgot all my subfields here, but you guys are experts, you know what should be there. So yeah, you can really go either way, whatever works best in your situation. And then I got this question. I was like, oh, I've wondered that. When creating original records, are we expected to duplicate genre form terms in the 380 and 655 fields? Somebody out there is like itching to start typing at this moment, I hope. So the MLA best practices for category of work say in whatever it's called now, official RDA toolkit, say for bibliographic records, consider a genre heading to record category of work. Generally, do not use field 380 unless directed by local policy. Prefer recording genre terms in field 655 instead. So there you go. So you don't necessarily have to have that 380. OLAC does say something, it seems a little different, saying that we should provide a high level or broad term for the form of work if readily ascertainable. And you can take the term from a controlled vocabulary, and they say use separate instances of field 380. So, and I went out and looked at the OLEC best practices because I was like, okay, are they talking about authority records here? Because that would be a different case. But among their examples, which I'll show you in a minute, they actually showed having both. And there's an interesting example to that effect. All right, so there was an ESS task group that dealt with this. So there you go. So here's an example from MLA best practices, basically saying, all right, so we've got in the heights, and it's a libretto, and actually in the example it had a 380 and a 655, but I took out the 380 because it didn't follow the actual best practices in a later document. So you can just have the 655 saying this is a libretto. When I looked at OLAC, it showed having a 380 and actually in this case multiple 655s, but I was really intrigued by how they did this. So they actually used the 380 to do a sort of broad genre form term for television programs, and then the 655s are the much narrower, more focused genre form terms. So detective and mystery television programs instead of television programs. I found that interpretation of things to be interesting. Yes, Keith, that's a great point. Yeah, if you have a term that's not in a controlled vocabulary, you could put it in a 380, or you could put it in a 655 with a second indicator 4. So yeah, my inclination would be generally to favor the 655s. And if your library wants 380s too, then by all means, they can have whatever they want. They're paying your bills, right? Sort of. All right, so to the task at hand here, I was sort of asked to think about, and so proposed to think about 3-4X fields especially, and also O2X. So I went through the 3-4X. I did a workshop on this earlier this week for public librarians and did some of these then and tried to work out the kinks for you guys. So we have a pretty large selection here. I left out, I think, maybe one for cataloging cartographic materials because I didn't figure that was applicable here. But you do still have a lot of things you can talk about. And the way I broke these down is just, here's the 3-4X field, here's what it's for, and then what kinds of resources does this actually apply to? So that you have a quick reference if you are, say, doing this and haven't done it a whole lot before, and you have to catalog a bunch of DVDs, you know which fields you need to go to and make sure you include and which ones you can skip. So 340, we'll start with that. And I got a question on this. So someone said, I'm seeing more bib records with repeated 340 fields. So they show an example with subfield B, 4 3/4 inches, subfield A, plastic, and subfield C, metal. Is this correct? Is there a preferred order? Some of the slightly older bibs seem to have everything in a single 340. What documentation do I use to find the standard current information? Is it on the MLA website or somewhere else? So here we go. All right, so there's just a quick link out to information about the 340 in bib formats in case you need it. So at this point, separate 340s and separate 3-4X fields in general are highly preferred because they're going to be best for making the controlled vocabularies in each of those fields and subfields functional, and they're going to be best for moving into linked data. But I would say you don't necessarily have to have, like for all your CDs and DVDs, the plastic and metal material metadata. Sort of depends on your best practices, but all of the best practice documents and examples that I went through to check this really only showed that material type information if you had something that was, as I say here, quote, odd. That wasn't your normal CD or DVD or Blu-ray. And I realize those aren't necessarily even normal anymore because we're supposed to stream everything, but still. If you had something weird that people weren't expecting, like vinyl, that's where that material comes in. Exactly. Historic audio formats, which are CDs and DVDs now. So there we go. So the way those subfields break down, there are actually a whole lot of possibilities, but these are the ones that showed up in this question and are probably most likely to show up in front of you. So the material and base and configuration and the material applied to surface are both. So if we have like a CD, then the material base and configuration would be plastic and the material applied to the surface would be metal. So that's where that is coming from. And there are vocabularies for those. The links are on the slide. And then the one I've actually seen a lot more of is the subfield B for dimensions. This would be at this point in addition to 300 subfield C, but I'm reading into it that eventually this would become the place where dimensions live and we could stop recording everything in one long sentence. And then I did share a link here. This can actually give you, from this question, what documentation do I use to find the standard current information? The MLA supplement here, and I can pop out to that and then give you the link in the chat box, gives you, you'll have to go there and then get the document for yourself, but it has tons of information and examples. Yeah, so I'm just going to check back through the chat here. Yeah, so there's comments about doing certain things. Yeah, Keith saying at this point, I think the question of order is mostly for the convenience of other catalogers. Our discovery layers don't care what order it's in, but catalogers may. So yeah, it's gonna sort of be up to you and you know what your best practices are as to which of these goes first. I see that Robert said he puts the materials in alphabetical order, but that's for the really cool stuff like board games. I haven't cataloged a board game yet. How fun would that be? So yeah, it's sort of going to depend on what feels good for you or what your local practices are. So there you go. The 340 is pretty straightforward. So we won't spend a huge amount of time on that. So let's see, Tom says 340 is displaying with LC as is 344 subfield G. Yeah. All right, so for sound recordings. So let's talk about something that it was definitely new to me when I started putting together all these different workshops on this topic. This is relatively new, the 341 accessibility content and the 532 accessibility note. OLAC has a really nice guide for 341s and 532s in their best practices. And they actually talk about in that best practice document where you should get the controlled vocabulary for this, because this is not one where you get the vocabulary from RDA as we usually would. So OLAC's best practices say that we should record the assistive features of the content using a controlled vocabulary, such as the schema.org accessibility properties for discoverability vocabulary. This is a long vocabulary name. And then once you use one of the terms from that vocabulary, you cite it basically through subfield 2 SAP DV. So the way the 341 is constructed is that you would have a first indicator. And if it's 0, it means that the adaptive or accessibility features are there to access the primary content of the resource, something like accessing the audio on an audio video disc. First indicator would be 1 if the adaptive features are there to access secondary content. Then you would use a subfield A. This would be the content access mode. So this is going to relate to the sense required to access the content of a resource without assistive or adaptive features. So if it says, for instance, auditory as the content access mode in the subfield A, it means that you need to be able to hear to access that content. And then we can use the B, C, D, and E subfields to address assistive features that are in place, whether they're textual, visual, auditory, or tactile. One interesting thing that I saw in OCLC bib formats about this was that the assistive feature that you enter in your B, C, D, or E subfield doesn't actually have to match up with the contact access mode in the A subfield, which just sort of breaks my brain if I'm just trying to think about how to apply this. So that possibility is there, but some of us are probably going to stick with trying to match things because it hurts otherwise. And then you would actually pair that with a 532 field, which would have that accessibility content in plain English. So this could end up looking something like this portion of a record where we have a couple of DVDs and we have a 341, first indicator 0. So this is for access to the content on the resource itself. Auditory is the method of receiving that content, and then captions is the assistive device. And then we would combine that with a 532 that says we have closed captioning in English, and then your 546 would still be for language content, but the 532 would specifically be for that accessibility language content. All right, I'm gonna keep going unless I see questions pop up. And we will pop on to the 344. There's a lot on this slide. This is really for you to have later if you like to have a cheat sheet like I do. I like to have everything broken down in one place. So this is sort of my 344 cheat sheet that has all the subfields that I could possibly use, when they're applicable, when they're not, the appropriate RDA rule. This is original old RDA because rule numbers, and it has a link out to the specific rule area in or it should. It looks like one of them is wrong, but it has a link out to that controlled vocabulary in the RDA registry, except for the one under type of recording. So basically with the 344, what's newish now is that, just like with other 3,4x fields, we're starting to split each of these elements into its own 344 field. So for example, if we had a CD that we were describing, you could have digital in the A subfield, and then in a separate 344 optical, a separate 344 stereo. So you're separating out those different elements. You're separating out type of recording from recording medium, from configuration of playback channels, because these are different things with different controlled vocabularies, different places where you find that information. That'll just make it easier for the computer to link up the correct term with the correct vocabulary and potentially make this work better for quick searching and sorting. I included a DVD example here too, just to show you that things would happen pretty much the same. The H subfield, there is actually a controlled vocabulary that we can use with the special playback characteristics. I can bring that up. So you can use this vocabulary, and you have things like Dolby and LPCM, but sometimes you want a little more detail than that. So sometimes you may put Dolby 5.1 or something like that in the H subfield. Then you're not using the controlled vocabulary, so you just don't have that subfield too. And if you had multiple terms, say that your DVD is in surround and stereo, then you would have separate 344s for each of those terms. So surround would get a 344 subfield G. Stereo would get a 344 subfield G. And let's see, that brings me to the next question. Somebody said for 344 subfield G, we should not code stereo unless the resource actually states stereo. Or is that completely wrong and we're supposed to assume stereo even when it's not present on the item? So RDA, original RDA, tells us to record a configuration of playback channels if the information is readily ascertainable. That's generally the rule that I would stick with. If the resource says that it's stereo, you record that. If it doesn't, you don't. I guess if you have the time, you could put it into a player and see if it's playing in stereo. But most of us probably don't have that kind of time. So take what you see. Assuming things usually gets us in trouble, so I would not suggest that. I can see why I mean, a lot of things are in stereo now, but we can't necessarily make that assumption. Yeah, so Janice says stereo became the standard by 1970 at least. So you can probably guess, but you know, my usual thing is sometimes things don't say they're in anything, but they could be in surround. So you have to sort of be careful. So Tracy's making the assumption. I mean, if Tracy's making the assumption, I would say that you should trust her and not me. Trust Janice and Tracy. But you know, definitely like write down these dates too, because you want to be sure about yeah, if you've got a 1960 recording, probably can't assume stereo. Oh, there we go. Yeah, with LPs, I would definitely follow the disc label because you just never know. Some of those are older. Yeah, so Joseph says in the 007, there is a subfield for audio, and sometimes that will be stereo, even though the item doesn't say it. Would that be a similar thing where we should not assume and have that subfield be U for unknown? So if it's already says stereo, I'd probably just go with it. Somebody, yeah, it's probably fine. But if you're cataloging it and you really don't know, if you're not comfortable with it, then I would go ahead and say unknown. If you don't have the information and you're not comfortable making the assumption. Yeah, and if you think it might be something other than stereo, if you have some sort of reason, but you're not completely sure, I would, again, be safe. Exactly what Michelle says. It does have a bearing on what equipment you use. So you don't want to steer people wrong if you can avoid it. Yeah, exactly. Something else to check on, right? Oh, Jennifer, that is a question I can't answer. So since mono CDs are essentially playing the same output on two speakers, is that stereo or mono? Somebody who knows that, please answer. There we go, Tom. Mono, depending on the content. Yeah. Oof. So yeah, that's a sticky little situation, aren't they often? There you go. Any other, that one really got us going. Yes, headphones can definitely clarify. Nope. Nope. Yeah, any other thoughts, questions with this before we move on? All right. Let's talk 345. So this is moving image characteristics. I left this in because I know a lot of us end up cataloging DVDs and Blu-rays relatively frequently these days. In this particular field, some of the elements only work for actual film. So if you're in one of those libraries, cool. And we could talk later if you need to. You probably know way more than me. But for anything else, there are relatively new C and D subfields in the 345, specifically for the aspect ratio. The C is for that aspect ratio value, so that's the numbers. The best practice is to do this with the denominator 1, so your second digit is 1, and there are calculators online that can do this for you if your disk doesn't have the number with the second digit of 1. Basically, you just take what the resource says with this. There's also the aspect ratio designator, and there's even a controlled vocabulary for this now, which kind of made me happy because I kept noticing that some people do widescreen as 2 words and some people do widescreen it's 1 word. And I thought, oh my God, isn't that going to be fun for searching? And so now there's a vocabulary. And it has widescreen as 2 words. So there you go. And I also love that in the vocabulary, we have the definition that tells us what aspect ratio it goes with. So potentially you could have the aspect ratio value and be able to get from that really easily from the definitions here, your aspect ratio designator, and have that in your record, even if the resource itself doesn't say full screen or widescreen. And I suspect there are some patrons who would appreciate that. So out in the real world, this could look like this particular disc record, where we have actually two 345s for the aspect ratio value. Just sitting right down here. So 1.33 to 1, 1.85 to 1, which means we have full screen and widescreen or something to that effect. And since there's more than one, it's a mixed aspect ratio. So that would be our aspect ratio designator. You can still put this information into 500s along with the 3/4x's, especially if your system is not dealing with these well or at all at this point. But it is kind of nice to have a place where this now lives. Video characteristics. This is the 346. Not much has changed here recently. You have your video format in the A subfield and your broadcast standard in the B subfield. Keep in mind that video format is for analog content. So if you've got a VHS, go for it. Or something earlier. Most of the time you'll see records with just the subfield B or no 346 at all, because some of them don't have anything about broadcast standard. And there is a vocabulary for that. So you can end up with something like subfield B NTSC. Agree, Joseph. Yeah, the aspect ratio can be really important for some people. And for those of you who are at institutions where you sort of by default become the entire performing arts collection librarian and or cataloger, this could then come in handy. Just going to pause for a second, give everybody a second just to catch up, ask any questions, make any comments. Yeah, the regions can be confusing. And actually, I'm going to go back for just a second because let's look at the vocabulary. I'm not sure it gives us a whole lot of, it does. It does give us definitions. So like for NTSC, I mean, I don't know what half this stuff means. I just know I'm supposed to put it in the catalog record. But this helps us out with what is actually going on with those standards. And that is important for, if you have film students, or if you just have people who have certain equipment they want to watch these things on, or they just really like film, don't discount that. So that can be important. Yeah, and so here we can actually in the 347 get into that regional encoding too. So going beyond like the NTSC, CCAM, that sort of stuff, into what region your disc would play in, which is a little different. You also here in the 347 have things like file type and encoding format. Some of this uses controlled vocabularies, some of it doesn't. Some of it's really not useful. Some of it is. It sort of depends on your library and your collections. So we can actually go out and see some examples here. This is where you get to have the fun stuff like video file for the file type, DVD video for the 347 subfield B, and then the subfield E, you can have region 1, and there's controlled vocabulary for that too. So, and it actually, I was looking at the vocabulary the other day, it tells you what the different regions mean, like where they're for, which could actually be kind of handy if you're not completely sure what is going on with your resource. It can actually point you toward, oh, that's why I understand nothing going on here. This region is coming straight out of China, and I have no knowledge of that. So 347 subfield E. Oh, this example, that's actually a Arabic numeral. Yeah, it's just the font. Yeah. So it's just doesn't have the little doodlies hanging off of it, whatever those are. Yeah, but this does come out of the vocabulary, so it is an Arabic numeral. All right, what you've all been waiting for, notated music characteristics, 348. All right, so there are 4 main subfields here. Format of notated music, the code for that, musical notation term, form of musical notation term, and then the code for that. I have links out to the vocabularies for those. Keith has actually watched me get completely baffled by these before. He probably thought I was interesting. I was just like, what is going on? So maybe some of you get confused by this too. I mean, if I sit and I read it carefully and I think about it, it's like, oh yeah, format of notated music is different from form of musical notation, but they're so similar in wording. So I went ahead, oh God, yeah, even before this presentation today, I had to sit down and just say it out loud just to be sure I was okay. So I pulled the definitions because that helps me a lot. So format of notated music is the musical or physical layout of the content of an expression. So this is something like score or part, whereas form of musical notation, see, this is also the problem, I want to say the wrong one at any moment, is the characters or symbols that are used to express the musical content, like staff notation or tablature. But yeah, this one I have to say out loud to myself, because if I just glance at it, I'm like, crap. And then also the code for each one. If you, like me, are a dyslexic typer more often than not, get a macro going, something, because RDA FNM and RDA FMN, what could possibly go wrong? It's special. Oh, good, Keith, thank you. So yes, this is RDA FMN is the replacement for 546 subfield B. Mark doesn't care. You musicians, you whine too much. So, this sort of relates to all of that. And Marty, you have a great question there. So 3XX realm. So am I now correct in thinking there is a newish subfield of 546 for the form of musical notation? I am not sure about that, but for the most part, we're trying to move everything out of that 546 and into the 348, if I am remembering correctly. Oh, Jacob, I like that. Yeah, so here we go. You got your form of musical notation and it ends with the notes. um, uh, so, but wasn't familiar with practice or documentation. Yeah, it's a thing. All right, I apologize for the dyslexic typer. All right. Yes, so prefer 348. So I got a question. Somebody said MLA best practices do not include the B or D subfields for the A and C respectively in the 348, yet catalogers continue to add it. If it is not recommended to be included and my institution does not require it, why put it in the record? Such a good question. I do not change the mastered record, but have to take them out before updating and exporting to our local catalog. I would not mind a bit less work to do when working with copy records. So you are correct. MLA best practices do say that generally you do not apply the option to record an identifier notation unless directed by local policy. So you would do score delimiter to RDA-FNM for format of notated music, and subfield C staff notation for form of musical notation. See, I'm doing it, rather than keep those codes in there. Now, what I suspect is sometimes happening with that is that they're being added by probably bots. Yeah, it's a connection macro. So it's just sort of popping in. So yeah, if you don't want it in your system, I think you're going to have to take it out. If you want to add it, you can go out and find those codes just in case you're curious and you're like, what is everyone talking about with these codes? It took me a minute, but they're actually over here with the RDA FMN or RDA FNM. It's the little code that goes right after that. So 1001, 1002. So there is a dummies guide over there. My inclination is always to add less unless you're supposed to add more. But I'm not even convinced those codes are the correct usages of those subfields, you know? Who knows? Yeah, so they're special. If you're not adding them, don't feel bad. Don't worry about it. Looks like it's fine. All right, I'm going to pause there, see if there are any questions, comments. We're moving through quite quickly here. You never know how many questions people will have. All right, let's see. Morris gave us as an example. You can always count on Morris for the good examples. If only we could choose what to use our brain space for. I'm with you. Let's see. So Emily said, can you go back to the previous slide for a second? Is that the previous slide? Awesome. There you go. Oh, Robert, I was sort of wondering about that too. So the 340 subfield G is for the color content of your visual materials. So the terms are monochrome or polychrome. The way I look at it is it's probably, if your system uses it, it's probably about as useful as you putting in the B subfield sound, comma, color. And it's probably aiming to replace that color sitting there randomly. But it does sort of depend on how your system is using it. I think it has a lot of potential. I think a lot of this has a lot of potential. It gets me very excited. But it's whether or not it's doing much now. I don't know if others have ideas on that. Yes, more for bib frame. It'll map from the 007 and also give us some extra stuff. Come from the leader in the 008 and add more things that we don't have in linked data friendly format right now. Huge potential. Yeah, form of musical notation. Gotcha. Which is different from format of notated music. Oh, is there nothing for shaped note music, staff notation, even though the note heads are shapes? That's a good question, Sarah. Yeah, somebody who knows a lot more about the various different shapes of notes and things might need to check on that for me. But yeah, I mean, I don't see shaped note there, and just from a quick glance through, not reading in front of everybody, it doesn't look like there's anything too similar. So that could be something to ask for. Oh yes, make the 3XXs in good shape, make the 3/4Xs in good shape. Awesome. See, you're in the right place here, Sarah. You bring it up and Ethan says, I'll take care of it. Oh, and Keith has said here, there's not anything for shaped notation, but there's a draft vocabulary proposal for that and a few other things. Yay. Music catalogers for the win. This is what I tell my students. I'm like, I hang out with the music catalogers because honestly, they're on top of things in a way that blows all other catalogers out of the water, and all other catalogers are on top of things. I was like, so I just go hang out with them and feel like an idiot half the time and try to keep up. All right. That's funny. The things I put in the 382 subfield V. Yeah, that is not part of what we're doing today because that's a whole other thing. All right, looks like we're sort of slowing down a bit there. All right. So a question I got that I just love is, when do I stop adding elements? Um, this is one of those things I struggle with lots of things. I mean, if it's good, it could be better if I add some more stuff. My general rule of thumb when you retire, yeah, though, I mean, we see with Randy, some things don't stop. So my general rule of thumb would be if there's not one at your shop yet, try to come up with, at least for yourself, but potentially for everybody who you're working with, some sort of standard of base things that you're going to include. And maybe even create like a group macro or something that, I can't remember how half that stuff works anymore. But yeah, put stuff together and have at least your base stuff. And then as far as when you're gonna stop, you could go on for a long time. So yeah. Yeah, Mark has a good point. Consider if the absence of data will cause concern about whether an item in a cataloger's hand matches the description. And I would say also, I've run into this a few times, depending on where you're cataloging and what you're cataloging, sometimes you want to think about what's going to cause the least confusion that can help you to stop, because sometimes adding more is actually going to confuse your specific patron base. So there are times when you may want to actually have a best practice in your shop where, we're going to add like the surround and stereo and Dolby, but we're not going to add like all of the different Dolby types, because we ran a survey and every patron who noticed it was confused and none of them liked it. It's a very awkward example, but again, I work mostly with public librarians and school media librarians when I'm teaching in North Carolina, and there's a certain point where we need to stop so their patrons don't feel completely overwhelmed. Yes, I love that, Mark. Yeah, have a conversation with whoever governs your catalog displays. If that's your vendor, good luck. Enjoy. And you can use macros and constant data to help put a lot of this stuff into your records. Even the stuff you have to customize, you can at least have a dummy field pop up that you then fill in. And then also, if everything else is piling up and you're just like, I could do this for days and I think I'm going down the rabbit hole, it might be time to put it to the side and come back later. Any other thoughts? Anything anybody else wants to add to that? Oh, yeah, check your indexes. That's good. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, if this is going to add functionality, it's worth it. It's just, if it's not, then you have to think about things a little more critically, potentially. All right. So what I had next was O2X fields. These are so interesting. So we've got our O24 fields, and I went and I grabbed some images to sort of illustrate these and just wanted to walk through. I know some of you know this very well, but some of you may like a refresher or just a place where everything is in one place. So first indicator in an O24 will mean that you have a UPC. These are generally going to be 12 digits long and are going to be paired up with a barcode. You're usually going to find these on objects or AV type materials. Then the ISMN, International Standard Music Number. This is usually with notated music resources. It's usually either 10 to 13 digits. And I went ahead and pulled in that pre-2008, you would usually have 10 digits and it would be an M plus 9 digits, basically. After 2008, you have 13 digits and it's going to be 9790 plus 9 digits after that. That can sometimes help you identify something. It's not unusual also for the ISMN to sort of be labeled like you see what's on the slide here. And then the international article number, the EAN, this is also 13 digits. And I got a question saying, all right, so for 024020 and 979 numbers, these are generally ISMN, but they can sometimes be ISBN, which is confusing. Yes, that is confusing. So MLA has a best practice saying that we should routinely encode a 13-digit EAN formatted identifier beginning with 9790 as an ISMN in the O24. You can optionally also encode such an identifier as an EAN using O24 first indicator 3. There's not anything specifically about ISMNs, and some of them, or ISBNs rather, some of them do have those same at least 3 initial digits. Double check that 0. I think the 0 is pretty clear. Yeah, I mean, a quick look, 979 is probably your ISMN, but I've seen a lot of ISBNs that start with 979. So that 0 seems to be pretty key. And then you can look for that display, see if it says ISMN anywhere. Yeah, they ran out of space in 978. Thanks, ISBN, for getting into our territory here. So, Mark has a good thing here, UPC. UPC is usually United States, EAN is usually everybody else, the big wide world. And so, yeah, ISBN is making things more difficult for us. I would say look for that 4th digit 0. If it's a score, you're probably pretty good guessing that it's an ISMN. But this was one where I had a little less knowledge, so I wanted to open it up to you guys. All right, so let's see, for subfield 1, when validating in connection, it will say it's too short for most first indicator, except for first indicator 8. Should we delete these fields when we run into them or change them to first indicator 8, or is there another solution? Oh, that's a good question. What say you, experts in the field? That one I don't know. Yeah, Rebecca says don't delete. I think that's a good idea. If it won't validate and you can't move forward, you could move it to this first subfield. Yeah. First indicator 8. So yeah, somebody did something possibly wrong, but you do want to keep it. So yeah, maybe change that first indicator to 8, and maybe even you could include a little note in there, something like originally coded as UPC or something. Or if you find a number that's almost exactly the same, you can probably correct it and it's probably okay. But jump in and tell me if I'm wrong on that. Ooh, yeah, Lynn, that's a good idea. Subfield Z. Of course, I forgot subfield Z. Yeah, so subfield Z saves you all the time. I completely forgot about that. This is why you guys are here. I can put together a presentation and sort of do the Sonia show, but you guys are in it all the time. Right. So moving right along, I also put together a sort of cheat sheet for myself for the 02X, because you have all these first indicators and they can go with a lot of different things. So I went through and I sort of figured out where certain first indicators would go and said, okay, audio recordings would probably end up potentially with first indicator 0, 1, 3, 5, or 6, most likely. Scores is a more manageable list, 2, 3, and 6. Video recordings 4, 5, and 6. And then I had somebody ask the question about what's going on with the indicator 6. This is sort of new. What do I do with it? And OCLC has a really nice little sentence about this, saying, if in doubt as to whether a number is a publisher number or a distributor number, record it as a publisher number. So you have the distributor number, and this can come in handy. But if you're not sure if it's a distributor number, you can just call it a publisher number and it's fine. The big thing is that the number gets in there and people can look for it. That's a large part of what we're trying to do here. So for example, here's a little chunk from a score record where we have an 028 with a 3 in the first indicator. Actually, we have 2 with 3 in the first indicator and 1 with 6 in the first indicator. So if we went back and cheated, because I don't remember things for longer than a minute, the 3 in the first indicator is for the other music publisher number, and the 6 is for the distributor number. So we have 2 publisher numbers, basically 909 and HN 909. And then we have a distributor number, 514800909. And you can see we have different entities linked with each of those. So G. Henley gets linked as the publisher with HN 909, whereas Hal Leonard gets linked with the distributor number. So if you have something where it's pretty clear who created the number, so that can be useful. The other example I brought was just pretty straightforward. First indicator 4 for this time video. So we're talking about publisher number here for video, I believe. Again, I can't remember anything for very long. So yep, video recording publisher number. And that can have that 4. So, you know, the label matters depending on the resource, but if you're unsure about whether it's publisher or distributor, go with publisher, basically. All right, let's see. So we've got some questions here. As I understand it, non-music video recordings should use the 037. Someone asked about this for an OLAC TF I was on. So we consulted Jay. And I believe he told us to use the 037. If Jay said it, it is correct. And then Ethan says, does the 028 subfield B have to match the first 264 subfield B? That's a great question. Yeah, so Reed said it has to match the one that corresponds to the number, which might technically not match the one in the 264, though I think that would probably be a pretty rare case.
I'll interrupt here. This is Mark
Ooh.
Scharf. Not rare for 19th century materials where publishers would require plates from previous publishers and then reissue them. So, but that's a situation where you are to explain that to your user in a note.
Awesome. Thank you. All right, let's see. Just making sure. Challenge with 037 for videos is indexing. Yes. True. Yeah, Morris. It depends on what 264 field you have and what subfield B goes with that. So yeah, if you've got a publisher number, but you have a distributor note in the 264, those may not match. So yeah, and vice versa. So yeah, hopefully it matches most of the time, but might not. Oh, publisher pet peeve. Oh boy, this could go on for a while. Reprints that are obviously reprints, but strip out the original plate numbers and publisher information. Yes. Yes. You're not alone, Keith. There are 80 something people in here, or there were the last time I looked, and you're going to get like 80 something likes on that one. All right. So I did have a question about the 028. And somebody said, does it really matter what value you put in the second indicator's position? And I had to say, well, it depends. So here's what the second indicators mean. I just brought these out. Most of the time I see people using 1 or 2 in that second indicator position. And so I went out and did a deep dive into a whole bunch of catalogs. Just went to a whole bunch of places where I knew we had smart music catalogers who were doing great work. There was no shortage. I could have gone for a really long time and started digging around. And what I found was, on a broad scale, no, it doesn't seem to matter what your second indicator is, because it displays differently in different catalogs. So I saw the same record in multiple catalogs that had the same second indicator, and it would display or it wouldn't display. So I think that's going to be your individual display. And then also Mark brings up, like, it depends on what control you want or can control. So if you make a note for plate number and 500, you could choose not to display this in your system. If it won't display in your system, that's a good workaround. But then, yeah, there's someone like Casey who your system could care less what the second indicator is. And then there are others where they do. So I think it's going to be important to figure out what your system needs and just make sure that you're meeting those needs, because universally, I don't think there's a one size fits all with this that I was able to find, but please correct me if I'm wrong. Oh God, Michelle, reprint and revision interchangeably. No, not the same. Yeah, so let's see. Keith is talking about best practices. That's always a good thing. We removed mention of the 028 second indicator because it wasn't clear to us. Yes, I actually remember consulting that and being like, well, they're not telling me anything. Thus the deep dive into catalogs. So there you go. All right. So yeah, you all have sort of different practices, and I'd say do what works best in your system. Oh, hey, yeah, go read Jay's book. It may not apply to your system anymore, but I mean, if Jay said it, it's fine. All right. And I had one more piece of advice that someone had submitted to my little survey ahead of time. And I love this. So I reworded it a little bit to make it work on my slide. But basically, if you're entering consecutive numbers into an 028, use the dash, the little dash between the numbers. And that will allow OCLC and potentially your system too, we hope, to search for all the numbers in that range. So if you had DL 10085, DL 10086, and DL 10087, and DL 10088, you could do the range as it shows on the slide. And this should make it so that OCLC's connection and potentially other platforms are going to find all of those numbers. So that was a piece of advice somebody put in. Then I see for BIBCO catalogers, LCPCCPS says, don't give the ranges, use separate fields, so listen to that. Andrea says it doesn't always work. All right, it only works if there's a prefix. Nice, Janice. So there you go. Do it, don't do it. We've received 2 sets of advice. But I think, I mean, what works for your system is going to be the most important thing. That's always the case, right? Let's see. That's really funny. Yeah, LC wants you to enter them separately. All right. That was my last little bit there. We've still got 15 minutes, which you can have for more break time, or we can continue to talk. You guys can give advice or ask questions. So yeah, that's it from me. Please chime in with the chat box or unmute or raise hands or whatever, or we'll take a break. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks, y'all.
All right. We do still have time for questions, as Sonia stated. We still have about 15 minutes until our designated break time. But if people would like a little bit longer break, we can most definitely do that. And I've been looking at the chat. I haven't seen any more questions come through. I don't see any hands raised. So I would like to say thank you, Sonia. You definitely gave us a lot of information today. And I believe that if Sonia consents, she will be posting her presentation onto CVent here after MOUG. So you can all have all of these links and everything that work. So in the meantime, I would like you all to do the reactions and give Sonia a Zoom applause. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording, and then we will all come back in 30 minutes. Thank you, everyone. Have a good break.